The silence after the battle is always the loudest. It's not a true silence, of course. It's filled with the groans of twisting metal, the faint, sickening hiss of escaping atmosphere from a dozen gashes in the hull, and the frantic, muffled shouts of damage control teams. But after the roar of plasma cannons and the shriek of tearing alloy, the quiet is deafening. It's in that eerie calm that you have to face what you've done. And what you've chosen not to do. I stood on the command deck, the acrid smell of ozone and burnt wiring stinging my nostrils. Below us, through the main viewport, hung the shattered remains of the Cthar battle group. They were the galaxy's boogeymen. Reptilian, ruthless, and fueled by a creed that promised only two outcomes, victory or annihilation. For them, there was no surrender. To be captured was a disgrace worse than 1,000 deaths. They had hit our colony, a soft, undefended world of farmers and engineers, and they had shown no quarter. So when the call went out, we answered. Not with a matching fury, but with a cold, precise wrath. We are humanity. And we've learned the hard way that in the vast, dark theater of space, you can't just be strong. You have to be smart. You have to be unforgettable. My crew moved around me, their faces grim, their hands flying over consoles, assessing the damage, counting the cost. We'd lost good people today. I could feel their eyes on my back, waiting. They knew the protocol. They knew what came next. The Cthar flagship, the Claw of Vengeance, was adrift. Its weapons were silent, its engines dark. But it wasn't dead. Life signs flickered on my tactical screen, hundreds of them, trapped inside a dying Leviathan. The old way, the Cthar way, would be to finish it. A single torpedo into the reactor core. A quick, clean end. It's what they expected. It's what every species in this quadrant would have done. It's the logical, safe move. But we gave up just being logical a long time ago. Commander, a voice beside me said, tight with tension. It was my weapons officer. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of his station. The Claw is drifting into the gravity well of the gas giant. They have maybe 30 minutes before they're pulled in and crushed. Their life support is failing. They're bleeding heat. He paused, and the unspoken question hung in the air between us, heavier than any enemy warship. Do we end them? I looked at the data scrolling down my own screen. I saw the panic in their fading power signatures. I imagined what it must be like on that ship. The darkness, the cold creeping in, the certain knowledge of a crushing, inescapable death. They weren't praying for rescue. They were praying for the end to be swift. Open a channel, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm in the thick air of the bridge. All frequencies. A beat of hesitation, then a nod. Channel open, Commander. I took a breath, leaning slightly towards the mic. Cthar vessel Claw of Vengeance. This is Commander Wright of the Terran starship Resolve. Silence. Only the faint crackle of static from their crippled comms. We are tracking your trajectory and your system's failure. You are aware of your situation. I kept my tone flat, professional. Devoid of gloating. Devoid of hate. That was the key. We are capable of rendering assistance. A burst of harsh, guttural static erupted from the speaker, a Cthar voice, strained and furious. We do not accept poison from our prey, human. Give us the clean death we are owed. It is our right. I had expected this. Their entire culture was built on this pride. To them, our offer was an insult, a final humiliation. And that is your choice, I replied, my voice still even. But the offer stands. We can deploy emergency stabilizers to halt your drift. We can send over engineering and medical teams. We can save your crew. The laughter that came back was a raw, broken thing. You think we are fool? You will take us, experiment on us, make us slaves. No, I said, and for the first time, I let a sliver of something else, something harder, enter my voice. We will repair your ship. We will treat your wounded. We will give you enough power and supplies to make it to the nearest neutral outpost. And then, we will let you go. The silence from their end this time was different. It wasn't just the silence of broken machinery. It was the silence of utter, world-shattering disbelief. You lie, the voice finally whispered, the fury gone, replaced by a confused, seething anger. I do not, I said. You will return to your high command. You will tell them what happened here. You will tell them that humanity had you at its mercy. And that we showed it. And there it was. The real weapon. It wasn't the plasma cannon that had torn their wingmen apart. It wasn't the point defense lasers that had swatted their missiles from the void. It was this moment. This offer. This, mercy. Because what do you do with an enemy who doesn't play by the rules? What do you do with an enemy who, when they have you completely and utterly broken, doesn't finish you? They help you. They force you to live with your failure. They force you to return home, a living, breathing testament to their, what? Their stupidity? Their weakness? No. That's the first, easy conclusion. But later, in the quiet of their own chambers, the Kthar commanders would think deeper. They would realize it was neither. It was a message, colder and more terrifying than any declaration of war. It said, we are so far above you, that your destruction is not even a necessity. We are not your enemies, we are your judges. And we have found you worthy of a second chance you did not earn, It was a psychological virus. It would spread through their fleet, their command structure, their very culture. It would breed doubt. It would shatter their core belief in the binary nature of conflict. The next time a Kthar captain saw a human ship on their scope, they wouldn't just fear death. They would fear the unbearable weight of our forgiveness. Your time is short, I said, my eyes fixed on the drifting, wounded beast of a ship. What is your answer? The channel remained open, the only sound a faint, ragged breathing from the other side. My crew was frozen, every one of them holding their breath. The fate of hundreds hung in the balance, but more than that, the future of every encounter between our species from this day forward was being decided right now, in this unbearable silence. We had thrown a stone into the dark pond of the galaxy, and we were waiting, hearts in our throats, to see what kind of ripples it would make. The silence from the Kthar ship stretched on, becoming a physical weight in the air of the bridge. Every second was a grain of sand dropping in an hourglass, their ship slowly, inexorably, being pulled towards the swirling, violent embrace of the gas giant below. I could feel the eyes of my crew on me, a mixture of trust, anxiety, and a raw, nervous energy. They believed in the doctrine, we all did, but living it was a different thing. It was a knife's edge. On my tactical screen, the life signs of the Kthar crew flickered, a stark reminder of the real, breathing lives caught in this standoff. This wasn't an abstract exercise. These were beings who, just an hour ago, were trying to kill us. My weapons officer hadn't moved, his jaw clenched so tight I thought I could hear his teeth grinding. He'd lost a friend in the fight, a young engineer who had been in the wrong corridor when a plasma conduit burst. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the human desire for vengeance warring with the discipline we had to uphold. Finally, the calm crackled back to life. The voice was different now. The fury was gone, replaced by a strained, bewildered exhaustion. Human vessel, resolve. Your terms, they are a poison we cannot understand. To accept would be, to unravel. I leaned forward, my voice low but clear, cutting through the static. It is not a terms of surrender. It is an offer of life. Your culture tells you this is a dishonor. I am telling you that honor is not defined by how you die, but by what you choose to live for. You can die for a failed doctrine, or you can live to carry a new truth back to your people. The choice is yours, but the clock is ticking. I muted our end of the channel and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My first officer moved to my side, her face pale but her gaze steady. "They're listening," she murmured. "They're actually considering it. I never thought." "None of us ever do, the first time," I replied, my voice low. "It goes against every instinct." I looked away from the viewport, towards the quiet, dimly lit memorial wall at the back of the bridge. It held the names of ships and colonies lost. It held the reason we had to be different. "We tried it their way, for a while," I said, more to myself than to her. "After first contact, when the Kthar hit the outer rim settlements. We met their fury with our own. We thought overwhelming force would bring them to the negotiating table." I shook my head, the old, cold anger simmering deep in my gut. "It just made them more determined. They saw our anger as a weakness, a confirmation that we were just another predator in the dark. For every ship we destroyed, two more seemed to appear. We were winning battles but losing the war, and our humanity in the process. The memory was a dark stain on our history. The retaliatory strikes, the body counts, the propaganda. We had become mirrors of our enemy, and in that reflection, we saw a future of endless, grinding conflict. It was a dead end. The turning point was the Odyssey," my first officer said softly, her eyes also on the memorial wall. Every officer in the fleet knew the story. It was drilled into us from the first day at the academy. "The Odyssey," I nodded. "Cornered a Kthar raider that had just massacred a civilian transport. The raider was dead in the water, just like that ship out there. The Odyssey's captain, an old veteran from the Martian campaigns, had lost family on that transport. Every fiber of his being, every rule of engagement, screamed at him to fire the killing shot." I paused, the story feeling more real and immediate than ever. "But he didn't. He hailed them. He offered them medical aid, power, safe passage. The Kthar on the other end were, confused. Then enraged. They accused him of cowardice, of trickery. They detonated their own core rather than accept his help." A somber quiet fell over the bridge. "We thought it was a failure," the weapons officer said from his station, his voice rough. "It was," I agreed. "For that crew, for that moment. But the transmission was heard. It was analyzed. The Kthar High Command couldn't process it. Why would a victorious enemy not press their advantage? They dissected the recording for months. They came up with a dozen theories, a trap, a psychological weapon, a sign of fatal division in our ranks. The one thing they never considered was that it was genuine. That act of strategic mercy, even though it failed, planted a seed of doubt in their absolute certainty about us. It was the first crack. Our most powerful weapon isn't something that destroys bodies, it's something that shatters ideologies." I turned back to the viewport. The claw of vengeance was now visibly tilting, its nose beginning to dip towards the immense, banded planet below. "And now," I whispered, "we get to see if that seed can grow." The comms officer looked up, his face tense. "Commander, I'm detecting a power surge on the Kthar ship. It's not weapons. It's their main comms array. They're directing a tight beam transmission, not at us." My blood ran cold. "Where?" "Trajectory analysis suggests, it's aimed deep into their own territory." A courier burst. "They're sending a message home." The bridge went utterly still. What were they sending? A final defiant curse? A report on our weakness? Or something else? Before I could process it, the original Kthar voice returned to the open channel. It sounded hollow. Resigned. Human resolve. "We have heard your offer." There was a long, painful pause, filled only by the growing strain in the speaker's breathing. "We cannot, we will not, accept the shackles of your mercy. Our fate is our own." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. They were choosing death. But then the voice continued, and the words that came out were not what any of us expected. "However, the message has been sent. They will know. They will know what you offered. The voice broke, and for a second, I heard not a fearsome warrior, but a terrified being facing the end. Do not watch. Grant us that. The channel went dead, not in a burst of static, but with a soft, final click. My first officer looked at me, her eyes wide with a horrified understanding. They're going to scuttle. All hands, brace. I shouted, but the order was unnecessary. On the viewport, the claw of vengeance didn't explode. Instead, a series of small, precise detonations ran along its spine. Their own self-destruct charges. A controlled, deliberate act. They were tearing their own ship apart to deny us the choice, to reclaim their narrative of a warrior's death. For a moment, the great ship hung there, a silent, fractured monument against the vastness of space. Then, it began to break apart, the pieces tumbling slowly, gracefully, into the crushing gravity of the giant below, until there was nothing left but the memory of their choice, and the ghost of a message racing into the dark, its contents a terrifying, unresolved mystery. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. We just watched, all of us, as the last glittering piece of debris was swallowed by the orange and red storms of the gas giant. It was a funeral pyre on a cosmic scale. They'd chosen their end. On their terms. And yet, they'd sent the message. The courier burst is gone, the comms officer finally said, his voice hushed. It's in a tight beam quantum slipstream. We can't intercept it. Can't decode it. I just nodded, my eyes still fixed on the empty space where the ship had been. My throat was tight. We'd offered them a hand, and they'd chosen to cut off their own to avoid taking it. Was this a victory for the doctrine? Or a brutal, tragic failure? The question hung in the air, infecting everyone on the bridge. The high-minded strategy felt cold and ashy in my mouth. Set a course for the rally point, I ordered, my voice sounding rough. We need repairs, and the crew needs rest. The journey back was quiet. Somber. The usual post-victory chatter was absent. Instead, there was a tense, waiting silence. We had thrown our stone, and now we were waiting for the ripples to hit the shore. We all felt it. This wasn't over. 2 days later, they found us. We were in deep space, licking our wounds, when the long-range sensors started screaming. Multiple contacts. A lot of them. Emerging from the void not a million kilometers off our port bow. My heart slammed against my ribs as I ran onto the bridge. The crew was already at their stations, faces lit by the frantic glow of tactical displays. It's a Kthar armada, the sensor officer reported, his voice trembling just enough to send a chill through me. A full battle group. The Reaper's shadow is leading them. The Reaper's shadow. The personal flagship of the Kthar overlord himself. A vessel that had never been seen this far into human space. A ship whose name was synonymous with planetary bombardment and extinction-level events. On the main view screen, space itself seemed to tear open as one ship after another slid into reality. They were massive, bristling with weapons we hadn't even known they possessed. They outnumbered us 20-1. There was no fight to be had here. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. They're hailing us, the comms officer said, his face bone white. Priority channel. Encrypted with, a human diplomatic cipher. That got everyone's attention. A human cipher. My first officer and I exchanged a look. This was unprecedented. This was the moment. The ripples had arrived. Put it through, I said, straightening my jacket, trying to project a calm I absolutely did not feel. The main screen shifted from the terrifying view of the armada to the face of a Kthar. But this was no common warrior. His scales were a pale, ancient gray, etched with intricate patterns of command. His eyes, those cold, yellow slits, held an intelligence that felt like it could see right through the screen, right into my soul. It was the Overlord. I'd seen his image in 100 intelligence briefings. For a long moment, he just stared. The silence was a weapon, designed to make us sweat, to make us break. Human vessel resolve, his voice was a low, sibilant hiss, devoid of the rage I'd expected. It was cold, analytical, and infinitely more dangerous. You offered the claw of vengeance, clemency. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. The message had gotten through. We did, I replied, keeping my voice level. The offer was genuine. We have analyzed the transmission. Every micro-expression. Every fluctuation in your biosigns, remotely captured from your bridge. He leaned forward slightly, and the sheer pressure of his gaze felt physical. Your weapons officer desired vengeance. Your first officer felt doubt. Yet you showed only resolve. That is the name of your ship, is it not? He had seen everything. He had dissected us from light years away. It is, I said. You practice a form of war we do not comprehend, the Overlord continued, his tone shifting from analytical to something darker, more intense. You wield mercy not as a weakness, but as a stratagem. You seek not to destroy your enemy's body, but to dismantle his spirit. To make him question the very foundations of his being. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle on the bridge. I could feel my crew holding their breath. This cannot be allowed. The finality in his voice was terrifying. A foe who fights with plasma is predictable. A foe who fights with an idea is a cancer. It must be cut out, completely, before it spreads. On the tactical display, the entire Cthar armada powered up their primary weapons. A constellation of targeting locks painted our hull. The Reaper's Shadow's main cannon, a planet killer, began to glow with a malevolent green energy. This was it. We had pushed them too far. Our greatest weapon had provoked their ultimate response. But, the Overlord said, and that single word hung in the air, charged with impossible tension. The glow of the cannon dimmed, just slightly. The claw's final message contained a request. From a dying warrior to his Overlord. He did not ask for vengeance. He asked for understanding. The Overlord's gaze felt like it was pinning me to my chair. He said your act of strategic mercy was a more profound victory than any military defeat. He said it was a power they could not counter. And he begged me to see it. The bridge was so quiet I could hear the hum of my own console. So, human, the Overlord hissed, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to fill the entire ship. I am here. I am watching. The fate of your ship, and the future of your entire species, now rests on a single question. You have one chance. One. Show me. Show me this power you call mercy. Convince me not to erase you from the galaxy. Make me understand why I should not give the order to fire. The air on the bridge was so still I could hear the frantic, thumping pulse in my own ears. The Overlord's challenge hung in the space between us. A live wire crackling with the potential for our extinction. He wasn't just threatening us, he was demanding a performance. A demonstration of our core belief under the blinding, hostile glare of his entire armada. How do you prove mercy when a gun is held to your head? Isn't the very act corrupted by the threat? My mind raced, scrabbling for purchase. Any move felt like a misstep. Any word, a trigger. I could feel the weight of every life on my ship, of every human life beyond it, crushing down on me. This was the test the Odyssey had failed. This was the moment where doctrine met the unforgiving reality of a predator's gaze. And then, a small, blinking alert on my command console caught my eye. A passive sensor ping. It was faint, almost lost in the massive energy signatures of the Cthar fleet. But it was there. A civilian vessel. A small, unarmed deep space freighter, the Starlight Runner, registered out of a neutral colony. It had stumbled into the middle of this standoff, its simple navigational computer probably screaming warnings it couldn't even comprehend. It was drifting right between us and the Reaper's shadow. A piece of cosmic dust in the path of two titans. A cold, terrible idea began to form in my mind. It was a gamble so insane, so reckless, that it made my hands go numb. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about them. The innocents. The Overlord's impatience was a palpable force. Your silence condemns you, human. Your philosophy is a hollow shell. I held up a hand, my eyes locking with his on the screen. My voice, when I found it, was quieter than I intended, but it cut through the tension. You want a demonstration, Overlord? You will have one. But not with us. I turned to my tactical officer. His face was a mask of confusion and fear. Lieutenant, scan the Starlight Runner. Full diagnostic. I want to know if they've taken any radiation damage from the Kthar fleet's emergence. I want to know if their life support is stable. The lieutenant's fingers flew over his console, a frown deepening on his face. Scanning, sir. They're fine, Commander. A little shaken, but their systems are nominal. They're just, sitting ducks. Open a channel to them, I ordered, my heart hammering against my ribs. Commander, my first officer whispered, her voice tight with alarm. What are you doing? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I had to see this through. The screen split. On one side, the cold, reptilian face of the Overlord. On the other, the terrified face of a human freighter captain, his eyes wide with panic. Asterisk Starlight Runner asterisk, this is Commander Wright of the TSF Resolve. I see you. You are in a contested zone. Contested, the captain stammered, his voice cracking. They're Kthar. There's 1,000 of them. What do we do? I kept my gaze fixed forward, ignoring the frantic man on the screen, focusing instead on the impassive Overlord. I was speaking to both of them now. Captain, you will follow my instructions precisely. You will power down your engines. You will divert all non-essential power to your navigational shields. You will not make any aggressive moves. Do you understand? But, they'll kill us. You will trust me, I said, and I poured every ounce of conviction I had left into those words. I had to make him believe it, because I sure as hell didn't. I was betting all our lives on a theory. I turned my attention fully to the Overlord. His head was tilted, his expression one of deep, dangerous curiosity. He saw the piece I had moved on the board, but he didn't understand the game. This civilian vessel, I said, my voice ringing clear across the bridge. It is not a combatant. It poses no threat to your mighty armada. Its destruction would be, tactically meaningless. It would be an act of simple, brutal slaughter. I paused, letting the word slaughter hang in the air. The Kthar are warriors. You respect strength, you respect a worthy foe. This is not a worthy foe. This is a test. The Overlord's eyes narrowed to thin, yellow slits. A test of what? Of your honor, I said, the words feeling like a leap into a bottomless chasm. We practice strategic mercy. We offer it to defeated enemies to shatter their dogma. But what is the value of mercy if it is only a weapon? What is its value when it is inconvenient? When it is granted not to an enemy, but to a bystander, by a commander who has the absolute power to destroy them? I gestured to the freighter on the screen. You hold that power now. Their lives are in your hands, not mine. I cannot save them. Only you can. So I am asking you, Overlord of the Kthar Armada. I am asking you to show them mercy. Let them go. Let them pass through this space unharmed. Prove that the concept is not just a human trick. Prove that it is a universal power. Prove that you are more than just a destroyer. The silence that followed was absolute. I had just turned his own challenge back on him. I had thrown the doctrine of strategic mercy into his lap and dared him to wield it. I had made the terrified crew of a single, helpless freighter the most important people in the entire galaxy. The Overlord was no longer looking at me. He was staring at the image of the Starlight Runner, at the face of the terrified captain. His expression was unreadable, a stone mask. The fate of my crew, of that freighter, of everything, now rested on a single, terrible question: what would a predator do when you asked it to spare the lamb? The silence stretched into an eternity. The only sound was the shallow, panicked breathing of the freighter captain echoing through our bridge speakers. I could feel the seconds ticking away, each one a hammer blow against my resolve. I had thrown the most dangerous gamble in human history, and now we were all waiting to see how it would land. The Overlord's gaze was locked on the freighter captain's face. He seemed to be studying it, dissecting the raw, human fear with a clinical, cold intensity. I saw his eyes, those ancient, yellow slits, flicker for a fraction of a second. It wasn't with anger or contempt. It was with recognition. He was seeing something he understood, something his culture had spent millennia trying to burn out of itself, the primal, undignified, and utterly universal will to live. He slowly turned his head back to me. The weight of his entire civilization felt present in that look. You ask me to perform your philosophy for you, human. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, devoid of its earlier hiss. You ask me to be your instrument. I am asking you to make a choice, I replied, my voice raw. One we did not have the power to make for ourselves. That is the heart of it. Mercy cannot be demanded. It can only be given freely. He was silent again, his massive, scaled hand resting on the arm of his command throne. I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The strategic value of crushing us, of erasing this dangerous idea. The sheer, intoxicating power of granting life instead of death. He was at a crossroads, and the entire galaxy was holding its breath. Then, he moved. It was a slight gesture, a twitch of his fingers towards a subordinate off-screen. On our tactical display, the terrifying target locks that had been painted on the Starlight Runner vanished. The civilian vessel, the Overlord declared, his voice resonating with a newfound, unsettling authority. You will plot a course for the Cygnus Beta relay. You will not deviate. You will not look back. Your lives are yours. Go. The freighter captain on the split screen stared, his mouth agape, unable to process the words. Then, a sob of sheer, disbelieving relief escaped him. Thank you. Thank you. The channel from the freighter cut out as his ship, with trembling haste, began to move, sliding away from the armada like a minnow escaping a pod of whales. The relief on my bridge was so potent it felt like the oxygen had returned to the room. My weapons officer slumped in his chair, letting out a shaky breath. My first officer put a hand on my shoulder, her grip tight. We had done it. We had. But the Overlord wasn't finished. His gaze returned to me, and it was sharper than ever. Do not mistake this, he said, the warning clear in his tone. I have not embraced your mercy. I have recognized a tactical reality. The destruction of that ship would have served no purpose. It would have been inefficient. He leaned forward, and the sheer force of his presence filled the screen. But you, Commander. You and your ship. You are the source of the infection. You are the ones who wield this concept as a weapon. That is a purpose. That is a threat that must be answered. The feeling of victory evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. The targeting locks snapped back onto the resolve, brighter and more numerous than before. The Reaper's Shadow's main cannon began to glow once more, that malevolent green light building to a critical peak. You have shown me the power of your weapon, the Overlord hissed. And in doing so, you have proven why it must be eliminated. A final, logical step. This was it. We had won the battle for the freighter, but lost the war for our own survival. Our own doctrine had been used to justify our destruction. The irony was a bitter pill. I looked at my crew, at their faces, now resigned and brave. We had tried. We had truly tried. Arm the self-destruct, I said quietly to my first officer. We are not giving them the satisfaction of. I never finished the sentence. A new alarm blared, a different, more urgent sound. The sensor officer shouted, his voice cracking with confusion. Commander. New emergence. Right on top of us. It's another Cthar signature. A single ship. Space rippled directly between us and the Reaper's shadow. A vessel. Smaller and older than the warships around us, slid into reality. Its hull was scarred and pitted, its design a previous generation. But it moved with purpose, placing itself squarely in the line of fire of the Overlord's planet killer. And then it opened a channel. On our main screen, a third window appeared. The face that appeared was Cthar, but older, his scales faded, one eye a milky white, bisected by a terrible scar. But he held himself with an authority that rivaled the Overlord's. Nephew, the scarred Cthar said, his voice a dry rasp. Stand down. The reaction from the Overlord was instantaneous and shocking. His cold composure shattered. His head recoiled, and a genuine, unguarded look of disbelief, and something that looked like fear, crossed his features. Uncle, he breathed, the word sounding foreign and weak. You were lost. At the Battle of the Serpent's Nebula. You were executed for cowardice. I was not executed, the old Cthar rasped. I was spared. He turned his one good eye towards me, and in its depths, I saw a history I couldn't possibly comprehend. By them. By the humans. The ship you called the Odyssey. The air left my lungs. The Odyssey. They had me, the old warrior continued, his gaze swinging back to his nephew. They had my ship, dead in the void. Their captain, he offered me the same choice you were just offered. I refused. My crew detonated our core, as is our way. But just before the end, their captain, he did something illogical. He launched a single-person escape pod, rigged with a tractor beam. It pulled me, just me, from the wreckage. They kept me. They healed me. And then, they let me go. He leaned towards his own screen, his expression fierce. They told me to tell a story. A story of an enemy who showed mercy to a defeated foe for no reason other than because it was right. I thought they were fools. I came back to the fleet, but I said nothing. I was ashamed. I hid. Commanding this old supply vessel, living a lie. He gestured to the terrifying armada around him. But I have listened. I heard the message from the claw of vengeance. And I have watched you today, nephew. I have watched you stare into the face of this human concept and see its power. The Overlord was speechless, his grand narrative crumbling around him. You asked for a demonstration of their power, the old Cthar said, his voice softening for the first time. Look at me. I am that demonstration. I am living proof that their mercy is not a weakness. It is a seed. And it grows, even in stone. It grew in me. And it has been growing in you, or you would have vaporized that freighter without a second thought. He looked from his nephew, to me, and back again. The choice is no longer about this one human ship. The choice is about what we, the Cthar, become. Do we remain what we have always been? Or do we allow ourselves to be changed by a power we finally cannot deny? The power of clemency is not a human weapon, nephew. It is a universal truth, and they were simply brave enough to wield it first. Stand down. Let them go. And let us talk. The Overlord stared at his uncle, at the living ghost from a battle long past, the embodiment of the very doctrine he had sought to erase. The green glow of his main cannon flickered, then died. The targeting locks on our hull vanished one by one. He didn't look at me again. He simply looked at his uncle, a lifetime of dogma warring with a new, terrifying, and undeniable reality. He closed his eyes, and gave a single, sharp nod. The armada began to turn, slowly, gracefully, retreating back into the void from which they came. The old Kthar on the screen gave me one last, unreadable look, a look of gratitude, of regret, of a future uncharted, and his ship followed. We were alone again. The silence on the bridge was no longer deafening. It was profound. We had not won a war. We had not fired the final shot. But we had planted a seed in the most barren soil imaginable, and watched as it, against all odds, had cracked open the stone. The last Kthar ship vanished into the shimmering distortion of slip space, and the starfield returned to its quiet, normal black. No one on the bridge moved. No one spoke. The silence was a fragile thing, like glass that a single word might shatter. We were all just, waiting. Waiting for the adrenaline to fade, for the reality to sink in that we were still alive. My legs felt weak. I leaned heavily on my command chair, the cool metal a solid, real thing under my trembling hand. I looked at the faces of my crew. The weapons officer was staring at his console, not really seeing it, his shoulders slumped not in defeat, but in a kind of stunned release. The young comms officer had her face buried in her hands, her body shaking with silent, ragged sobs of relief. We had stared into the abyss, and for a terrifying moment, the abyss had not just stared back, it had listened. My first officer was the first to break the silence. Her voice was a hoarse whisper. The Odyssey, all this time. He was the seed. I just nodded, the story of the old, scarred Kthar warrior echoing in my mind. The captain of the Odyssey had died thinking his act of strategic mercy had failed. He could never have known that his single, illogical act of pulling one enemy from the fire would become the thread that, years later, would pull all of us back from the brink. He had practiced the power of clemency not for a victory, but simply because it was right. And in the end, that was what made it so powerful. It was a debt that had been paid forward across the years, finally coming due to save us. "Let's go home," I said, my own voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It wasn't triumph. It was something deeper, more humbling. The journey back to Earth was different. The silence wasn't heavy with dread anymore, but filled with a quiet, shared contemplation. We had our repairs to make, our wounded to tend to, our dead to mourn. But there was a new feeling in the recycled air of the ship. A sense of purpose that went beyond just survival. I found myself often standing by the memorial wall, looking at the name Odyssey. It wasn't just a name of a lost ship anymore. It was a promise. A testament. Weeks later, we docked at the Lunar Command Station. The debriefings were long and intense. Admirals and diplomats sat in sterile rooms, their faces a mixture of awe and skepticism as we relayed the events. They understood the strategic victory, of course. A potential pathway to peace with the Kthar, something that had been unthinkable. But they struggled with the method. "How do you weaponize an idea?" one of the senior admirals had asked, his brow furrowed. "You don't, sir," I had replied, feeling the ghost of the old Kthar's words on my tongue. "That's the point. The moment you try, you corrupt it. The power of clemency isn't a weapon. It's a mirror. It shows an enemy what they could be, if they were better. And sometimes, just sometimes, they decide to look." We were given leave. I went back to Earth, to a small house with a view of a lake. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were filled with the silent, judging face of the Overlord and the scarred, resolute eyes of his uncle. I kept thinking about the crew of the Claw of Vengeance, who had chosen death but sent a message of truth with their final breath. Their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. It had been the spark. A month into my leave, a sealed data packet arrived, marked with the highest level of diplomatic encryption. It wasn't from our government. The origin code was Kthar. With a heart that felt too big for my chest, I opened it. There was no message. No words. Just a single, unedited audio file. I played it. It was the sound of the Bridge of the Reaper's shadow. I could hear the low hum of their systems. The subtle clicks of their language. And then, the Overlord's voice, speaking not to me, but to his council. The translation software provided a crisp, text overlay. The human doctrine of mercy is not a doctrine of war. His voice was calm, analytical, but there was a new undercurrent in it. It is a doctrine of cultivation. They do not seek to break the tree, but to graft a new branch onto it. They understand that the most permanent victory is not the annihilation of an enemy, but his transformation. The resolve did not defeat us. They pruned us. They forced us to see a rot in our own logic. My uncle, whom we thought dead to dishonor, is in fact a living testament to a strength we did not recognize. We must now consider, do we fear their mercy because it is weak? Or because it reveals our own weakness? The file ended. I sat there for a long time, the silence of my house pressing in on me. He wasn't praising us. He was analyzing us, with the cold precision of a surgeon. But in that analysis, I heard the first, fragile cracks of change. He was trying to understand. That was all we had ever asked for. I never went back to Deep Space Command. They offered me a promotion, a desk job shaping the new doctrine of strategic mercy. I turned it down. You can't put something like that in a manual. You can't train for it. You can only live it, in the moment, when the choice is laid before you. Sometimes, I visit the academy. I talk to the new cadets, their faces bright with idealism and fear. They always ask about the battle, about the armada, about the moment the guns were aimed at us. But I don't talk about the fear. I talk about the quiet. I talk about the freighter captain's sob of relief. I talk about the old, scarred Kthar who appeared like a ghost to speak the truth. I tell them that our greatest weapon isn't something you can build in a shipyard. It's the courage to offer a hand to someone who is trying to kill you, and the wisdom to understand that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not to destroy your enemy, but to give them a chance to become something else. The war isn't over. Peace is a long, difficult road. But the shooting has stopped. And it stopped not because we found a bigger gun, but because we finally found a way to make our enemy question why he was shooting in the first place. In the vast, cold calculus of the cosmos, that might be the only victory that truly lasts. This kind of story is why we built this channel, to explore the what if of a better future. If you want to be part of that community, hit subscribe. We have a whole universe of stories waiting for you. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done in the commander's place? And for your next journey, the next video on screen is one you won't want to miss.